Originally released for the Sega Saturn in 1996, Nights into Dreams is an arcade action game developed by Sonic Team in a bid to bring high-quality 3D action to the Sega Saturn. It follows a character named Knights who teams up with two children as they fight the evil Wizeman, who's trying to destroy the dream world of Nightopia and, in turn, the real world that the children come from. While I didn't play this game growing up, Nights into Dreams, which is often referred to as simply Nights, was one of the few Sega Saturn games that was on my radar as a kid. When I was 5 or 6, I remember leafing through an older Archie digest while I was visiting my cousins in the Philippines. On the back of the digest was an ad for a comic based off of the game, and I've found myself curious and transfixed with the character ever since. Something about Knight's gesturely design struck a chord with me, and I spent most of my childhood just wanting to play the game. I don't even think I fully understood what a Sega Saturn was at the time, but I knew I had to play Knights on one. Unfortunately, though, I never did. In 2007, Knights was ported onto the PlayStation 2 as a Japanese exclusive release by Sega, and in 2012, that version was then remastered in HD for the Xbox 360, the PS3, and PC. The Xbox 360 version was the way I played this game for the first time, and I remember feeling confused and kinda overstimulated by the gameplay before I grew to enjoy it for how fluid and addictive it was. Over the years, Knights has garnered a reputation for being a bit of a cult classic. Fans of the game love the title for its colorful and psychedelic graphics, its incredible soundtrack, and its extremely fun and fast-paced gameplay. And Sega knows how much we love Knights, even if they won't make more sequels to it. The game and its main character has been referenced and featured in everything from the Sega All-Stars games to Sonic Adventure, and the game did receive a sequel for the Nintendo Wii, which got middling reviews. That's actually another game I'd love to review in the future, but in order to do that, I need to actually start this review first. So, does Knights hold up 25 years later? Well, let's find out. For this review, I'm going to be playing this game over on Steam, and I'm also going to be playing the game's remastered mode, as it includes a couple quality of life improvements that I feel will improve my experience with this game. It is worth mentioning that the original Saturn experience is preserved here though, in case you guys are looking for something a little more authentic. The central gameplay of Nights into Dreams is pretty straightforward, though it does also have quite a bit of complexity if you want to learn every facet of its scoring system. Essentially though, each level starts with one of the child characters being attacked by monsters that rob them of these things called ideas. Alright, so little interjection from editing, Nick. The word is actually pronounced idea, and it's actually a take on the Tagalog word for idea. So I'm kind of right, but I'm wrong here. So yeah, I'm wrong. I refer to them as ideas for this video, but they're really pronounced idias. That's on me. I guess you could say I'm an idiot. And place them in a cage. After this happens, you'll need to navigate the child character over to a shrine of sorts to start playing as knights and to retrieve them for the kids. Ideas are kind of an interesting idea as they represent the character's emotions and sense of hope, intelligence, wisdom, and purity. Because the monsters have stolen these kids' ideas, they basically have become overcome with fear and need Knights' help in order to get them back. Because the game takes place in a dream world and the opponents you face in the game are nightmares, the entire game is loaded with awesome surrealist touches like this that give the game a strong sense of wanderlust and nostalgia. They also reflect the influence that psychologists such as Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung had on the development of this game and its world. Concepts like ideas are really cool because it's a step away from traditional stories for video games and makes the game stand out a bit. I honestly can't tell if I'm looking into things too deeply here or not, or if my own sense of nostalgia is clouding my judgment here, but this game feels incredibly wholesome and uplifting. Again, it could just be me reminiscing about my childhood and holding this game up on a pedestal because of its impact on me as a kid, but I honestly have so much affection for this game. Anyway, once you actually start playing as knights, you're tasked with flying around and picking up these blue orbs while you fly through rings and avoid monsters that are on each level. While you technically can attack these monsters and use them to help you switch directions and fly in loops, combat isn't really this game's focus, and it's probably for the better. The cages keeping the kids' ideas away from them require 20 blue orbs in order to be broken. after you've freed the ideas, it's as simple as flying back to the shrine that you started at in order to start the next section of the level and eventually take on a boss. If you take too long to complete part of the stage and run out of time, Knights is suddenly transformed back into one of the child characters who then has to run back to the shrine and retransform into Knights. There's also this clock that'll spawn and chase you around. Letting it catch you wakes your character up, which means that they'll never reacquire their ideas, and that means that, well, you lose and we'll have to restart the level. The boss battles in Nights into Dreams are all fairly simple and usually just require flying into your enemy and using your attack. Aside from the awesome presentation and music during these battles, it's honestly a fairly brain-dead experience and is in some ways a precursor for the sort of boss battles you'd see in the first Sonic adventure. You can basically just brute force your way through these boss battles, and while you may get a worse rank for it, you will still beat the boss without much trouble. You can control the direction that Knights flies in with the analog stick, and you can also attack or perform a boost by hitting the A or X button, depending on whether or not you're using an Xbox or PlayStation controller to play this remaster. It's also worth mentioning that you do have a meter for your boost, which needs to be refilled by flying through rings. The controls themselves feel pretty good. Things are as responsive as they need to be, and while I do think the analog sticks are a bit too sensitive for my liking, I never totally feel out of control of my character. Plus, this could just be due to the game being the first Saturn game to support analog control and have nothing to do with the remaster itself. Either way, it's pretty easy to get used to and is in no way that bad. As far as difficulty goes, the game is pretty easy to beat and can be done in just about an hour or so due to it only having 7 levels. But even though the game is relatively short and easy, it's also extremely addictive. This is due to the game's extremely fluid controls, and the game having a ranking system that's not too dissimilar from the one in, say, Sonic Adventure 2. Because of it, you'll find yourself coming back to this game over and over again in order to try and get a higher rank on each of these levels, which is great because the levels are a blast to play through and explore. Plus, in order to unlock the game's final 2 levels, you'll actually need to get a C rank on each of the character's 3 main stages, which will also likely result in newer players needing to play through each level 1 or 2 more times in order to learn the optimal routes to use. I wouldn't call this an issue though, as the levels themselves are fairly short and all stand out from each other. Each level revolves around a different theme and also features a different level gimmick that keeps things fresh. The gimmicks range from controlling Knights from behind, sort of like you're in an R-Wing from Star Fox, to controlling her from above, swimming through an underwater cave, or doing something else like sledding. These gimmicks don't do anything to change up the actual objective of the level, but do provide a brief respite from the game's main 2.5D gameplay. Oh yeah, you could probably tell if you've been watching the video for this long, but Knights is presented in 2.5D. Despite being a showcase for the Saturn's 3D graphics prowess, most of the game actually plays in 2D. While there are 3D sections in the game, the majority of this title features dreamy and psychedelic level design that's clearly intended to be played from a side-scrolling perspective. And honestly, the game's a lot better for it, as the 3D sections aren't exactly the best. They aren't terrible by any stretch of the word, but I have to admit that they do feel a bit cumbersome and have aged a little poorly in the controls department. The 2D gameplay, on the other hand, has aged a lot better and actually feels really fresh, especially when stacked up against a lot of early 3D titles from the era. These sections fill me with such a deep sense of whimsy. While I wouldn't call these levels the easiest to navigate in terms of how intuitive their layouts are, there's no denying how fun these level designs are to fly through. And I think this is in part due to the actual implementation of the levels themselves. Due to the game's collectathon nature, the levels are extremely linear and operate more like tracks for you to learn and time trial through. This is all aided by the game's extremely smooth frame rate and heaps of animation, which earned the original Sega Saturn version a bunch of praise back in the day. And thankfully, both of these qualities have made it into the game's modern port and hold up really well today, much like the next thing I'd like to talk about, this game's soundtrack. It's almost a running gag at this point that Sonic games have a good soundtrack, but despite that, I'd still like to extend that joke to include other Sonic team games like Knights. because wow, this game's soundtrack is incredible. I don't know what genre I describe Nights' soundtrack as other than dance or something, but it's extremely catchy and full of 90s synths and pulsing beats. If I had to compare it with any other Sonic soundtrack in terms of sheer quality, I'd probably put it up there with something like Sonic CD for how heart-poundingly fun and playful it is. It's really better off heard than it is described. Visually, Nights into Dreams looks great. I played this game in 1440p on a large monitor, and while I could definitely see muddily upscaled textures and sprites in the game, especially when they're juxtaposed against higher quality polygonal assets, I wasn't really bothered by them. Plus, I actually kinda like how it looks on a thematic level. Because Nights revolves around dreams and does a great job of conjuring warm nostalgic feelings for me, the upscaled textures and admittedly pretty dated 90s 3D graphics kind of enhance the game's psychedelic and otherworldly quality. It's kinda hard to describe, but it makes the presentation feel very gamey, which is counterintuitively kind of immersive in a way. It's kinda similar to Square's upscale jobs on their Final Fantasy remasters in that sense. While I do love stuff like the Mogiri mod for Final Fantasy IX, which takes the game's backgrounds and AI upscales them to perfection, there's also a lot of charm in at least kinda preserving the way these games looked back in the day. Plus, in the case of something like Nights, it's nowhere near as jarring as it was on the Final Fantasy re-releases. So, does Nights into Dreams hold up? Yeah. While this game certainly isn't perfect and does feature sensitive analog control and is a bit on the short side, I kinda think that those qualities are a part of the game's nostalgic charm. And even if you do find these qualities more aggravating than you would endearing, the game's strong presentation and incredible soundtrack are sure to help tide things over for you. Nights is a game best played frequently in short bursts, and thanks to how readily available and affordable this remaster is, there's honestly no better time to buy it than the present. Nights into Dreams can be picked up on Steam for just $7.99 and can easily run on just about any modern computer. So you owe it to yourself to pick this gem of a game up if you're ever looking for a fun 90s adventure. And with that said and done, that brings us to the end of this video. I'd love to hear whether you've played Nights before over in the comments, and if you haven't, what you think of the game based off of this review. If you have any games you want me to check out in future videos, feel free to tell me about it in the comments, or over on my Twitter or Instagram, which you can find in the description of this video. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed this video, and that you consider giving this classic game a shot. So, yeah. Bye.